Hello everyone, I'm Barbara Hamm Lee. During the past year, WHRO and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting have been committed to tackling the dropout crisis in our region. As part of the American Graduate Let's Make It Happen initiative, we've delved into reasons students drop out and highlighted programs that are turning things around. Some of the people spending a great deal of time addressing this crisis and fighting to close the gaps are our superintendents. Recently, 5 superintendents from the Southside schools shared their strategies for not only helping students graduate, but for making sure they're prepared for the 21st century workforce. WHRO is excited to bring you this meeting of the minds, which took place during the second annual Hampton Roads Regional Public Education Summit at Norfolk's Waterside Marriott. Here to bring us greetings from the Norfolk Public School Board is the president of the Norfolk School Board, Dr. Kurt Houston.
Good morning. On behalf of my colleagues on the Board of Education here in Norfolk, I am honored and pleased to welcome our colleagues from our sister cities here on the South Side to this second educational symposium. Last year, Chesapeake was kind enough to get us started and hosted a fine event there at the Chesapeake Conference Center, and so it was our honor to keep the ball rolling and to bring it to Norfolk this year. We placed an order for warmer weather, and they didn't have any in stock, and so we got what we got this morning. And I hope that those of you who've flown in from Virginia Beach and Chesapeake found our Norfolk Airport accommodating. But we are about very serious business in educating our children. All of us are, and in my opinion, it is certainly among the most important things that we do in this country. And we appreciate all of the professionals, board members and superintendents, administrators, teachers, and all that's required to do the great work, the sacred work of educating our nation's children. And so we believe this morning will be a useful and beneficial conversation that will inform, motivate, and stimulate us all to continue this great work. Thank you again for joining us this morning. Good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Houston. Now allow me to introduce our panelists for today's summit. Beginning with Dr. James T. Roberts, Superintendent of Chesapeake Public Schools. Dr. Roberts began his career in public education 44 years ago and has served as the head of Chesapeake Schools for 3 years. Dr. Roberts believes every child is a masterpiece and has devoted his entire career to educating children. Dr. Roberts will speak on finance and school construction. Please welcome Dr. James T. Roberts. Next to him is Dr. Samuel T. King. He is the newbie of the superintendents in Southside Hampton Roads, beginning his tenure as head of Norfolk Public Schools this past July after serving 7 years as superintendent of Rockdale County Public Schools in Georgia. Dr. King's vision is that all students will graduate fully prepared to pursue college and careers. Dr. King's topic is strategic planning. Please welcome Dr. Samuel T. King. Dr. David C. Stuckwich has more than 39 years in public education and has served as superintendent of Portsmouth Public Schools since January of 2003. Dr. Stuckwich believes the most important ingredients of a quality school system are effective teaching and opportunities available to seniors as they graduate from high school. Dr. Stuckwich will share his thoughts on Star-Based Victory and First College. A warm round of applause, please, for Dr. David C. Stuckwich. Dr. Darren R. Whitney has served the students, faculty, staff, and parents within Suffolk Public Schools for 16 years before becoming superintendent in January of 2011. Dr. Whitney's goal is for all students to become lifelong learners, equipped with the skills, knowledge, and attitudes to succeed as productive citizens in a national, global, and local society. Dr. Whitney's topic of discussion is continuous improvement, school improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Darren R. Whitney. And our final speaker this morning is Dr. James G. Merrill, Superintendent of Virginia Beach Public Schools since July 2006. Dr. Merrill's mission is to ensure that all students will graduate with the skills they need to succeed as 21st century learners, workers, and citizens. Dr. Merrill will address community engagement, and one more thing, Dr. Merrill has been named the 2013 Superintendent of the Year by the Virginia Association of School Superintendents. Please congratulate Dr. James G. Merrill. And now, Dr. James T. Roberts on finance and school construction.
In Chesapeake, we're very proud of our schools, and we know that all of you are equally proud of the students and staff in your school divisions. This morning, I would like to focus our attention on the impact of recent funding decisions on our students, our staff members, and our facilities. While the economic problems that have been present for the past 4 years have certainly driven funding decisions, it is safe to say that the approach taken by our General Assembly in the first 2 years of the downturn was to utilize K-12 dollars to offset much of the revenue shortfall. In round numbers, state general revenue in fiscal year 2008 was about $15.8 billion. It dropped to $14.2 billion at its lowest point in 2010, but it rebounded to $15.85 billion the current year. The amount of lost revenue that had to be made up at the maximum point was $1.6 billion. In that same period of time, 2008 to 2012, funding for public education in Virginia was reduced from $5.8 billion to $4.9 billion. That's over half of the general fund revenue loss, or $900,000. So, public education took the brunt of the expenditure reductions to balance the budget for the state of Virginia. Education is a state responsibility. Therefore, the state should provide full funding for the required educational program. It is therefore surprising and disappointing that compared to other state government areas, public education has been severely slashed in recent years. When we value something, we support it. These recent reductions in support reflect a change in how our leaders view public education, a critical element of state responsibility. Reducing state funding to our schools puts more pressure on the already stressed local governments to provide the dollars necessary to keep the high-quality educational programs in place. The recent tragedy in an elementary school in Connecticut created a lot of talk about school safety. Many ideas have surfaced in the wake of that awful event. In Chesapeake, ensuring school safety has been one of our strategic goals for many years, and we continue to be concerned about safety in our schools. We have over 80 school safety officers, not police officers, but school safety officers in all of our schools. Not one of those positions is funded by the state. We also have school resource officers, who are policemen, paid for by the city with no state funding in our high schools and middle schools. Recently, various ideas came out of Richmond regarding safety in schools. I would settle for and be grateful for some financial assistance in just keeping what we have. I could outline for you each individual reduction that was made, but that would take much too long this morning, and Barbara already says I've got 5 minutes. Some people might think that we should compliment those persons in Richmond who identified for cutting purposes funding areas that could be defended as not being in the classroom. But let me assure you that reducing school division state revenue by almost $1 billion a year will impact the classroom. I am very concerned about the current budget situation, but I'm even more concerned about the future. Historically, our 5 school systems have had success because we have invested dollars in our educational programs. Speaking for Chesapeake only, I can tell you that as a result of funding reductions in the past 5 years, we have not upheld our pledge to invest in our students. We've eliminated positions, we've provided little or no salary increases, we've not replaced aging classroom equipment, not replaced buses in a timely manner, cut our training opportunities, transferred costs to parents, and generally infringed on the quality educational program that has proven to be so successful for Chesapeake. Additionally, we have postponed needed facility improvements and repairs due to the lack of state funding, including the elimination of the lottery proceeds that had been earmarked for capital funding. If our leaders continue to make decisions that chip away at the funding for public education, or if they simply fail to recognize the impact of their decision-making, this shrinking investment will threaten our future. Let me expand on that thought. We are a people business. We're only as good as the employees we place in our classrooms and our offices and in any other area of this business we call public education. We will want to join our profession in keeping the salaries high, not remaining stagnant, not reducing benefits, keeping the job security there, and keeping the resources in the classroom that's needed. What's the attraction to the profession? Certainly public school employees are not drawn to the job for financial benefit, but they can be driven away from the profession by the current environment. The members of our proud profession find satisfaction in student success. The current and future success of our nation's children should only be our primary focus, but that success is being threatened by budget issues. If the pressure being placed on public education is not relieved immediately, and I don't mean the next biennium, I mean immediately, we will not only lose the benefits of our past investments, but we will also lose the promises of the future. And if we want to look into the promise of the future, we must look into the eyes of a child. Our 35th president, John Kennedy, spoke these words: "There are risks and costs to any program of action, but they are far less than the long-range risks and costs of comfortable inaction." The year 2012 is drawing to a close, leaving the world of public education with many challenges. As we look towards 2013 and a brand new year, I challenge all of us, education leaders, political leaders, and business leaders, to recognize that although there will be some risk and cost associated with a program of action that makes funding for the education of Virginia's children a #1 priority, there are far less than the long-range terms and risks and costs of comfortably doing nothing. Someone once said, "Vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world." All of us are serious about our commitment to public education and our collective vision of education success for every child. We are not merely dreaming, and we're not simply passing the time. And so in the months ahead, let us take action to restore the dollars to our public schools, and in doing so, let us change their future and their world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. And now, Dr. Samuel T. King on strategic planning.
I think a good, perfect segue from what Dr. Roberts' emphasis related to finance really centers on the need for total advocacy for public education across our community. Definitely at the state level, but certainly our local entity. So this morning I'm going to touch on our initiatives and steps thus far related to strategic planning. I'd like to first mention that as of July, moving forward, we held community conversations in reference to advocacy. Community conversations, community forums, to talk about the needs of our public school entity, Norfolk Public Schools, from a SWOT analysis concept, which really relates to what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are the opportunities that are out there, and what are the threats that might face us as we begin to transform our organization moving forward. All items of extreme importance. In addition to convening those community conversations, it was of paramount importance to engage the board across an approximately 2-day institute to talk about that SWOT analysis concept because the design and intent was to develop priorities for this current school year, 2012-13. Once we had that opportunity to move forward with those priorities, that particular entity consisting of our local board as well as the administration did an analysis of relevant, pertinent data that would stem back across several years to take a look at those things that would surface that would really pinpoint the heartbeat of our system to move us forward with the priorities that you see on the screen. And so that resulted in 7 priorities for our school system, again, serving as a backdrop for communicating across stakeholders for this current school year. The importance from there was to develop what we refer to as a parallel. While we knew we couldn't waste one single year, thus the 7 priorities for this current school year, at the same time, we knew that we must move forward very vigorously to develop a 5-year strategic plan to begin to transform our organization in a way that we would begin to move student achievement forward. So a 5-year strategic plan is really a robust need, which really calls for the engagement of the community. It really requires the engagement of the stakeholders, bringing all those entities to the table to talk about the needs of the school system. And so we were able to enter into that type of conversation as well.
The school district counts on parents, community members, businesses, and organizations to support the education of our students. Norfolk Public Schools is creating an ambitious improvement plan for the 2012-2013 school year and developing a 5-year strategic plan. Facilitating community forums is a way to present these strategies and goals to the public and solicit their help in developing high-quality education.
We really wanted to give people the opportunity to volunteer to serve on a strategic planning action team. As we've all heard Dr. King share throughout the past month or so, we are in the strategic planning process, and beginning in October, we will literally need hundreds of volunteers to work with us as we draft the 5-year plan for our school system. So the community members will literally work with us hand in hand to draft the action plans to guide or drive what this school system does to meet the needs of each and every child in Norfolk Public Schools.
I think it was a great idea, and I think parent engagement is one of the keys of helping us get back on track.
Getting the community involved is critical. Without the community's involvement, nothing can happen.
To find out how you can support Norfolk Public Schools, go to www.supportnps.org.
The school system is at the heart of our community, and as community members, we are all obligated to make it better for every child.
From there, we moved forward with convening a planning team, which represented a microcosm of our community, consisting of parents, consisting of teachers, business owners, faith-based, clergy, law enforcement, healthcare, post-secondary, about a 30-member group to talk about, over a 3-day period, those items of importance. First, their challenge was to develop community beliefs that really would serve as the guiding principles and guiding foundation for Norfolk Public Schools. On the screen you see examples of those, and at your tables you should have a document that reflects those beliefs that that group centered on and developed during that period of time. A key point is that they were required to reach agreement, not consensus, 100% agreement as they developed these beliefs. From there, the requirement was to move forward to develop a relevant, pertinent mission, vision statement, a 2-part mission, vision statement that also reflected the means for carrying out our actions in addition to the visionary portion that requires that we take a look into the future, determine the highest aspirations for our organization, and simply develop strategies for moving forward. That was also the quest and challenge of that group. From there, they developed parameters, which are really self-imposed rules that must not be violated as we plan and as we implement. Also, statements of measurement, which means that we can quantify, use a qualitative approach to determine progress. And it resulted in 5 strategies that you have at your tables that you can read at your leisure. And beneath each of the 5 strategies are big ideas which will result in action plans and action steps as we move forward. From there, I would like to mention that we now have over 500 community members that have stepped forward to volunteer and to be a part of these teams, and also specialists that serve on each of those teams. We have action teams, which are small subcommittees that also represent a small microcosm of our community to develop the current 5-year strategic plan that we will begin implementation as of July 2013 once we complete our rollout of the 7 priorities that we have for the current school year. And my closing statement is that advocacy for public education, of course, is of paramount importance, and the strategic planning process is a prime example of how we can rally our troops and our stakeholders to be involved and support us moving forward for student achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. King. Dr. David T. Stuckwich on Star-Based Victory and First College.
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning to everyone.
Morning.
When confronted with the decision about what to speak about this year, I reviewed the list of suggested topics and fit my decision under areas of interest regarding the 2013 legislative session. I've cut what I was going to say down because we need to be to 5 minutes, so I'm going to really speak about one topic, which is primarily First College. But I do have to confess, however, that the topic as it applies to the legislative session actually goes back to 2012. You know, I thought to myself, I needed to talk about something interesting, so I selected to speak about House Bill 1184. Now, you got to admit that that's really super interesting to talk about for 5 minutes about House Bill 1184. Okay, so what is House Bill 1184? I've got it right here. It's 5 pages long, it's very small print, and it's single-spaced. And I figured I'd spend the next 5 minutes reading it to you, but I didn't think that would be funny or interesting. But let me read one sentence, because there's one operant sentence in the bill that we're going to speak to. It says, under section number 10, a written articulation agreement for post-secondary degree attainment with a community college in the Commonwealth of Virginia, specifying the options for students to complete an associate's degree or a 1-year uniform certificate of general studies from a community college concurrent with a high school diploma. This is a requirement that we have to have in place by April 15th, 2013. So it's coming down in the next couple months. Now, explained very simply, what this legislation is about is K-12 schools interfacing with community colleges, which is commonly referred to as dual enrollment or dual credit. And with this legislation, AP credits are also, they can be involved if you want to throw them in. Before talking about meeting the requirements of House Bill 1184, I want to regress for a minute or two and speak about dual enrollment generally, and then talk about a significant dual enrollment program in Portsmouth. From that point, I will come back to House Bill number 1184. Dual enrollment courses are offered traditionally through 2 types of arrangements, either in-house high school taught by community college certified teachers, or on campus with high school students matriculating as traditional college students. The first arrangement, the in-house arrangement, is easier to control and there are fewer complications. I might describe the experience as still being in high school. The second arrangement places students on the community college campus and I believe offers a much richer experience for students. In-house dual enrollment has been around probably for 30 years or more. I know it existed when I was a high school principal, and that was 25 years ago. My first on-campus experience with dual enrollment was a rather personal affair. It goes back 19 years to 1994 when my daughter was about to begin her senior year in high school. She had decided she was pretty much done with high school and needed something more challenging. At the time, I was a superintendent in the Tri-Cities area. Through a series of inquiries, I caught up with the president of Richard Bland Community College, and we worked out a program for my daughter to spend every morning of her senior year attending Richard Bland and her afternoons back at the high school. At the end of that year, my daughter enrolled in a college in New Jersey, and every one of her credits from Richard Bland transferred. Additionally, she was very ready to take on the college environment and subsequently did quite well. Since that time, I have been a very active proponent of on-campus dual enrollment courses for high school seniors. In Portsmouth, we offer dual enrollment courses both in-house and on campus. The in-house arrangement goes back many years, well before my arrival 10 years ago. The only on-campus courses that existed prior to my arrival were some career and tech courses, primarily welding and that type of thing, and they were not heavily enrolled. In the fall of 2005, Portsmouth Public Schools initiated a dual enrollment program called First College. The program is very simple. Students interested in attending Tidewater Community College take placement exams before enrolling and begin the program in-house with 2 TCC English courses in the first semester of their senior year. Upon satisfactorily completing those English courses in first semester, they enroll full-time in TCC Portsmouth campus for the spring semester. All students must take a minimum of 12 credit hours. The program allows for a maximum of 14 credit hours. Initially, all the courses had to be within the Commonwealth Collaborative, which was set up by Governor Warner, but in recent years, and we've been going now for 8 years, we have spread out and they take courses pretty much wherever they want to in the university. Our guidance counselors work with students who show interest in First College during their sophomore and junior years to make appropriate high school, so to make sure that appropriate high school credits have been earned so the students are aligned to graduate when they take their First College courses. Portsmouth Public School Board pays 50% of the tuition for these students. Textbooks are loaned by the school division and transportation is provided. Students that show significant economic need, their 50% tuition beyond the school board's tuition is paid by the Beasley Foundation, so they go for free. Because of the generous support of the Beasley Foundation, all across our school division, beginning in our elementary schools, we tell our students, you can go to college. It all depends upon you to take advantage of that opportunity. On-campus dual enrollment meets the needs of three groups of students. For students who plan to attend a four-year school, it offers them the opportunity to experience college in a controlled setting, mistakes and all, and it saves their parents significant costs relative to the total cost of college. For students who do not know whether they want to attend college, it allows them to experience college without great financial commitment by their parents, and allows them one semester to know whether college is really their cup of tea. And most importantly, for students who have no family history of college and who have no financial means to attend college, it offers a path upward. As they say at TCC, from there you can go anywhere. Getting back to House Bill 1184, Portsmouth is planning to build off of its first college program with additional in-house dual enrollment courses, supplemented by AP courses taken in the student's junior year. This approach should meet the one-year uniform certificate of general studies requirement. Setting up a pathway to allow students to complete an associate's degree will require more creativity. Along with AP courses, dual enrollment virtual courses will probably need to be explored. In fact, that might be my topic next year when we talk about virtual courses. Long story short, working with Provost Michelle Woodhouse at the TCC Portsmouth campus, we will forge a pathway for an associate's degree. In closing, I want to specifically thank TCC President Dr. Edna Barry Colavani. I don't know if she's with us this morning. Dr. Colavani here? Anyway, Dr. Colavani had the bold move just recently of decreasing tuition for dual enrollment courses to only administrative costs. That's $45 a credit hour. This is amazing. This act significantly widens the higher education pathway for hundreds and over the years, even thousands of students to improve their futures. I want to thank President Barry Colavani. You have become truly a dream maker for many of our students. I thank all of you assembled for listening and look forward to the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stuckwich. Dr. Darren R. Whitney on continuous improvement, school improvement.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
I have the pleasure of talking to you about school improvement and continuous school improvement. And when you think about it, school improvement is what we're all about. It's what we're truly all about, and it's the most important business that we're in when you talk about schools. In fact, some of you may be familiar with Mike Schmoker, who is an author of several school improvement books. He indicates that the combination of three concepts constitutes the foundation for positive improvement results: meaningful teamwork, clear measurable goals, and the regular collection and analysis of performance data. When it comes to school improvement, it's common to just think about test scores. And while that's very important, we all know when you're talking about school improvement, it's a lot more than just test scores. So today, what I want to talk to you about are three major components of school improvement: meeting standards for accreditation, identifying and implementing an improvement process, and providing quality assurance. Now, when we talk about the quality standards, we all are very much familiar with the standards of learning. We know what's required as far as each of our subgroups, as far as each of our schools meeting benchmarks, as far as meeting those SOLs. We also are very aware of the federal guidelines as far as meeting those benchmarks as well, as far as meeting AYP previously and our annual measurable objectives. But many of our school divisions have taken a further step, and we've looked at accreditation through another process, which is Advanced Ed. I have the pleasure of serving on the State Council for Advanced Ed, which is commonly known as Southern Association for Colleges and Schools. And the good thing about this accreditation process is it looks at not just the end results, but it also looks at the process. The process, and it's narrowed it down to 5 standards. The first standard being purpose and direction, where it looks at, is the school maintaining and it communicates a purpose and direction that commits to high expectations for learning, as well as shared values and beliefs about teaching and learning. The second standard refers to governance and leadership. The school operates under governance and leadership that promotes and supports students' performance and school overall effectiveness. The third standard, teaching and learning. Again, what we're all about. Teaching, learning, and assessing of that learning as well. Looking at whether or not the school's curriculum, the instructional design, and the assessment practices guide and ensure teacher effectiveness and student learning. The fourth standard, resources and support systems. The school has resources and provides services that support its purpose and direction to ensure success for all students. And then the final standard is using results for continuous improvement. Again, looking to see what is necessary for that school to continuously improve. Regardless of how well we're doing as a school system, regardless of how well our students are doing individually, what are we doing to make sure that they're working to their full potential? What are we doing to make sure that continual progress is taking place? Looking at this improvement process, that includes three areas: determining instructional goals, data collection, and developing and implementing the actual plan. Determining instructional goals, as many of you probably are familiar with, is where we're analyzing the student's learning needs. What does the student need to learn? What does the student need to know? And how are we going to go about making sure that he or she meets that? Review pertinent findings of educational research. It's not about just what we think, it's educational research that we're looking at to determine whether or not this is the best practice or whether or not this is the route that we need to take. Defining desired results for student learning. If a student met this particular benchmark this year, how much are we going to expect from this student for the following year, and what are we going to do to get them there? Identifying the strengths and weaknesses within our program, or perhaps within our individual classes or with our individual students as well. Collection of data, evidence of instructional and organizational effectiveness as well. When we talk about collecting data, we look at the demographic data as well, and that's a matter of looking at the equality, the equity, if you will, with the outcomes. Looking at the subgroups, looking at race, looking at gender, minority groups, limited English proficiency, economically disadvantaged students. Are we closing that academic gap? When we talk about our school improvement, and we talk about it being related to SOLs, when you look at each of our school division's mission statements, you can clearly see that it's a lot more than just that. In fact, each of them talks about preparing our students for our society. So it's more than just the SOLs, although they're very important as well. The teacher's role in all of this is to focus on process data, why students performed as they did, disaggregating the classroom assessment data or the state assessment data as well, and utilizing data collection tables. It's not uncommon to go into any of our schools, any of the school systems that are here schools, to see data walls, to see where teachers are constantly looking at that data and making changes along the way based on what the data reveals. And determining who performed well or not and why. We refer to this as task analysis, skill-based assessment. In other words, looking to see where the student is, what do we need to do differently based on what the data says. And then focusing on the reteaching of subcomponents of skill rather than the entire skill. That's where the pre-assessment comes in, to where you do the pre-assessment, you see it's not necessary to perhaps teach this particular concept based on the fact that students have mastered it, but basing it on what students need based on what the pre-assessment drives you to do. The principal's role, our assistant principal's role, is understanding the target. Where are we as a school? What do we need to do? Where are we as a class? Where are we as students? And what do our teachers need in order to get our students there as well? That involves analyzing the data. As many of you may be very familiar with, we're able to analyze not just by school, but by teacher, by class, by student, and even performance by question, where we're looking at the students, how did they answer the question? What are those common threads? What do we see? What were the common mistakes? So what do we need to do differently as far as our teaching is concerned? And our major piece to this is monitoring student progress, monitoring all along the way. And that involves some of the external reviews that I'm going to talk a little bit about as well that takes place during this school improvement process or continuous school improvement. In fact, when you're developing the school improvement plan, of course we're going to determine what those goals and objectives are based on the data. We're going to identify the action steps for achieving those goals. What do we need to do? What's the first thing to do, next, and so on. And determining the timeline, resources, and assignments of responsibilities. All are involved, whether it's parents, community members, of course, our staff, as well as our students. What's the responsibility? Additional components of the plan include professional development, parental involvement, and external reviews. External reviews is where we go into the schools, interview teachers, interview students, interview the staff to see just where we are, to see if we're doing what we say we're doing, and then to make the necessary changes. In conclusion, we want to collect and utilize the required data for accountability and program planning. We want to ensure the school improvement process includes teacher-driven document, which is shared, which will allow for shared ownership for the development and the outcomes. And finally, increased levels of student achievement should be the driving force behind any school improvement initiative. Thank you.
Dr. Darren Whitney. And our final speaker is Dr. James G. Merrill on community engagement.
I do want to thank the Norfolk Foundation, Norfolk School Board, Norfolk staff who've helped, and really all of you for caring enough to come out this morning. I could simply do my presentation and say, this is community engagement, thank you very much. I do have a couple of comments though. We look at community engagement in Virginia Beach from a couple of perspectives. One is the side that includes the volunteers, partners in education, the Education Foundation. We've got a lot of strong data in Virginia Beach in terms of numbers, hours spent, and the dollar value of that time in volunteerism. What I really want to talk about, though, is more from the side of philosophic and strategic from administration, how you build a community that wants to be engaged and what some of those strategies might be. We've created a culture where the stakeholders, even taxpayers who don't have school-aged children, believe that our schools belong to everyone. And that doesn't just happen. You earn trust and subsequently the support of your community first and foremost by being transparent. And that means in good times and bad. We have a phrase that we refer to as breaking your own bad news. When you have good news, everybody shares it. But you know, when you got bad news, you got to put it out there also, and that's the first piece that proves and indicates that you're a transparent organization. School divisions are the authority on our own news and our own information, and nothing is ever simple, as you know, in public education. It can't be reduced to a 15-second soundbite. The media can't carry our message. Facebook can't carry our message. And so why should we allow reporters, external groups, social media outlets to convey our message? We don't in Virginia Beach. And let me share a brief example and some strategies. A year ago, we were facing almost a $40 million deficit. We had to propose major cuts to the budget. It's a matter of record. A lot of you probably remember those dealing with athletics, non-renewal of first-year teachers, just calamitous recommendations in order to balance. We drove our points home through the use of our own media, and when you think about your own webpage, it's not enough we have it on our webpage. You really have to push your information. Simply saying, here's a link, doesn't do it. Some of the things that we did when we were building up to our budget, we promoted well in advance that a budget message was on the way. We sent out news releases. We sent email to all staff. We tweeted the presentation. We set up a special web page. We had answer fact sheets, information. All those kinds of strategies that you would envision for a multimedia response to an issue. That is sort of what you do from your side of the equation. From the other side, then, you need to support your community in message points, in suggestions about speaking to other bodies about funding, whether it be state or local. When it's all said and done, you have a harmonious buildup of initiative and effort. But I would come back to what I said earlier. Transparency builds trust, and trust builds the capacity for engagement in your community. When the community trusts that you have common motives, that the standards and expectations are high, and that you communicate often, simply, and with irrefutable, accurate information, then you build that foundation for support and engagement as you move forward. Every time additional issues come up, you have to roll out a major communication plan. Leave no stone unturned, and the use of whether it's Alert Now or whatever it is a tool for communication. It's another vehicle for support. So I would simply close it at this point by saying you must build the foundation through transparency, trust, and credibility, and then you have a litany of strategies that you must deploy both from your side in pushing information and as well as helping folks in your community support your message and your issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill. We will come through, and I'm going to start the questioning. And this is directed to Dr. Roberts. And the question is, what is one thing we as citizens and community leaders can do to convince state legislators to restore and add funding for K-12 education?
Probably the biggest assistance you could provide to the public education bodies would be to recognize those services that have been eliminated from your schools and communicate that to the legislators. I really don't think they believe they have affected service, and they have. And so I would say that they will listen to you as a community member more than they would listen to me or even the persons that lobby for us in Richmond. They need to understand that the schools are not what they used to be. In Chesapeake, for example, we have 1 or 2 more students in every class, which is not a good thing. It's a value-driven type of thing that our community has recognized. And as Dr. Merrill said, the best thing we can do is communicate that effectively and transparently to everyone. So I would say that the answer to your question, Barbara, is that the effective communication from our public back to our legislators on how services have been cut would be the best thing that could be done.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Merrill, this is for you. When schools are perceived as doing well, do you find it challenging to maintain the community's sense of urgency in remaining engaged? How do you keep the community's attention and involvement through the good times as well as the challenging times?
Two thoughts come to mind. Number one, I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to always show that you're never as good as you think you are. And that you've got to look at those parts that are not to the level of standard and success that you want. And that's hard sometimes when you think you're good and you need to say, we're maybe not as good as we thought. The other thing is it's really not as hard to get community support over the last 2 or 3 years when we've just been hammered year after year through reduced budgets. For the last 2 years, we've had to non-renew our first-year teachers. We were able generally to bring them all back by the time the dust settled, but that kind of trauma doesn't help any organization, let alone student learning. So I think all of our communities understand the crisis that we're in right now in terms of the loss of funding, starting with what Dr. Roberts has said, and it's continuing.
Dr. King, this one is for you. In strategic planning, one challenge is prioritizing the many positive action steps the community suggests. How are you going to do that in Norfolk?
I think that when you are at the point that we are in terms of, and I'll use the term, transforming our organization. Again, strategic planning is of paramount importance, but in order to prioritize, you must prioritize as it relates to the analysis of the statistics and the data. So it's very important that we go back and continue to reflect and review and analyze relevant, pertinent data related to student achievement from a quantitative standpoint, but also those qualitative kinds of things that might relate to attendance, might relate to discipline, and all of those things that come into play, even family involvement and family engagement, and tie your decision making to what that analysis is telling you. And what that really means is that your analysis then is turned into action and action steps. And so that's how we plan to move forward with that.
Okay. This question is for each panel member, but I'm going to pick on one to start. And it's a two-part question, so let me read it through and then I'll repeat it if necessary. It says, Southside communities are all tied together. So the first question is, how can efforts of one district be leveraged to benefit other districts? And then the second part is, can you name duplicated efforts of expenses that should be combined to save dollars and improve services or results? Let me start with you, Dr. Whitney.
Well, I think it's important to point out that there are some efforts already. We have a Governor's Center. We also have the CSAP program for special needs students, in which we meet on a regular, there's a governing board that consists of the superintendents as well as board members, and that's a matter of not having to duplicate that service because of the fact that it's housed here in Norfolk, and all of our students have or some of our students have the opportunity to participate in that as well. We also take advantage of one another. I think during the times that we meet, we have Region 2 meetings. We meet and discuss budget issues, whether that's the issue or other instructional issues as well. So I think it's something that we're always looking forward to trying to enhance and trying to develop as far as utilizing one another as resources throughout our career.
Okay, Dr. Stutchwich, you want to add anything to that?
Additionally, we have a partnership with WHRO, which we do a lot of staff training, and they're also
I didn't do that.
You can pay me after the meeting. But I don't think, for folks that have been in Tidewater all their life, they don't realize that what a resource WHRO is. It's much more active in public schools than most public radio and television stations are. It is very much engaged with all of us. Like Dr. Whitney said, the other major ones are CSEP, the Governor's School that's here in Norfolk, which we're going to, in the process of building a new one right here in downtown Norfolk. So we're all very proud of that. We've worked together on that. Ones that we, looking into the future, we might work together on career and technical education. That's one that we don't. They do collaboratively out in the western part of the region, but we don't on the eastern part of this region. One that we could look at. Other than that, we probably do a good job of working together in this region. Forgot Access Scholarship Foundation is another one that we all work together on. That's a regional program. So I think we do an outstanding job in Tidewater in terms of regional cooperation.
This one is also to any or all, so I'll just pick one. If your funding was doubled overnight, what would you do with the new funds? Dr. Merrill.
Teacher salary. It's got to be first.
Dr. Whitney?
I would agree with him, teacher salary, but one of the things that our board does each year is develop budget priorities, and unfortunately we're never able to meet those budget priorities, so we'd start looking at that list as far as additional funding.
Okay, Dr. Stutchwich?
Obviously, teacher salaries. The next one is class size. We're up about 3 students in every classroom in Portsmouth than we were 5 years ago. We can't go any higher than we are right now, so we need to reduce class sizes.
Okay. Dr. King?
I would agree. I would echo the fact that the salaries would be an extreme issue for us and an issue of interest for us. But in addition, from a laser-like focus standpoint, offer safety nets for students that need additional time and additional services. In addition to those safety nets, enrichment for those students that excel, those students that are already achieving beyond expectations. And those are the kinds of things that we're not able to fund at this point, not at the level that we would like, and in reference to really harnessing the kind of motivation and momentum that moves student achievement forward. So those are some things that we would take a look at. In addition to our capital projects, we have some real needs across schools as far as the age of our schools and structures and building needs and that kind of thing. So those would be things of importance for us.
And Dr. Roberts?
Absolutely, teacher salaries. Number one, our teachers' beginning salary right now was lower than it was 5 years ago, which is absolutely ridiculous. We have situations in our schools where teachers are forced to go out and get second jobs that not only affects their income level, it also affects the amount of time they can put towards working with our students. And so We have to draw better people into the profession for the future. I mentioned that in my remarks. I worry about that a lot. I had the opportunity to meet with our SCA groups 4 or 5 times a year. The opening meeting this year, I always go around and ask them, you know, what college are you going to go to? These are mainly seniors. And what do you want to do? 21 students in the room, 3 from each of our 7 high schools. Went around the room, not one of those 21 students wants to be a teacher, and I asked them why. Salary, number 1, job security, number 2, and pressures that they see their teachers under right now. So we need to relieve all of those things. But and I wish the room was full of delegates and senators that could hear all of that.
Dr. Stuckwich, this one is for you. It says, I think the idea of getting students on campus in their senior year is a perfect way for them to get their feet wet before committing to college. However, do you think expanding this concept to a 2-year associate's degree is pushing our students too hard, too fast? How will this affect their ability to be kids? End quote.
Yes.
There you have it.
No, the 1-year unified certificate is doable. We can make a pathway to an associate's degree, but it is very difficult for a student to finish a full 2 years of college simultaneously with finishing high school. The issue you get into is not an academic issue, it's a maturity issue. The biggest obstacle we deal with in getting kids on campus is not their academic ability, it's their maturity. Anybody who's attended college as a freshman understands what I say when I talk about maturity issues. And taking, if you can imagine, taking a sophomore who's just finished their sophomore year and putting them on a community college campus is not a good idea. In my opinion, we will make the pathway. There might be some students taking it, but it will be few. Right now with the First College program, as we sit here, we're doing our orientation for this semester right now over at the Portsmouth campus. We have 160 students. Okay, it is a major program. We put over 1,000 students through that program. You're not going to find 1,000 students to put through an associate's program, a full 2-year program. I just don't see it as that realistic. We'll get it done. We always get it done, but I don't see that as a realistic goal.
Okay. On January 28th, PTA leaders and members will head to the General Assembly to meet personally with our state legislators to advocate for our children and teachers. Aside from funding, and this is for all of you, aside from funding, what in your opinion are the #1 questions we should be asking? Dr. Stuckwich.
Outside of funding, I would ask them to put no more rules and requirements and regulations on it that makes it more difficult for us to do our job. Other than that, it's about funding. You know, it's easy, that's what you hear in Richmond all the time. We need to talk about things that aren't funding. No, it's about funding. It's about resources for children. That's what we need from Richmond. We don't need more rules, more regulations. We know how to run our schools. We know what our students need. We need more resources from the state. It is their responsibility to fund education, not the localities. And they need to do their job. They need to do it. They need to take care of education. And while I'm saying that, they also need to take care of transportation. That's also their responsibility.
Is there, Dr. Merrill?
Days from the 60s, you heard it, didn't you? But, you know, another big issue I think that would help us is the issue of flexibility at the local level. Our boards are elected from their local communities to make decisions about our kids. And yet we have folks from as far away as DC and everywhere else setting policy decisions for us. Give us greater flexibility in our own autonomy and decision making. And also within funding, there is flexibility that can be granted inside of funding rules that would give us more latitude to move things and stretch the proverbial dollar farther.
Okay. Anyway, Dr. Whitney, you have anything you want to add?
When we talk about, it's hard to answer that without suggesting funding, because it's not just about salary, but just as someone said before, it's a matter of providing those resources to allow our teachers to be as effective as they can, whether it's a matter of lowering class size, of making sure they have the materials and things that they need in order to do their job, and offering programs to students to meet their needs as well. We talk a lot about differentiating instruction within the classroom, but we have a responsibility to differentiate our programming as well, and the only way we can do that is with funding. So it's a matter of looking at that big picture. Too often I think people look at just the classroom teacher is needed, but there are other positions that are needed in order to effectively run a school.
Okay. And the final question is to all of you. Will you all commit to actively informing parents and the community of the cuts to public education and empower them to lobby their state leaders to better fund public education? Is that a commitment you all will make? Absolutely. Absolutely, they say. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen, a public media initiative to increase high school graduation rates. Made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Support for WHRO's participation in American Graduate comes from Newport News Shipbuilding, continuing a 125-year legacy, and from Thomas Nelson Community College. Explore, excel, succeed. For more about American Graduate, go to WHRO.org.